I want to start this off by saying that this video would not be possible without the good people that run uesp.net. That's the Unofficial Elder Scrolls Project.net. I have learned so much from them, and that was number one. And number two is I am not an expert in Elder Scrolls lore. I just know a bit more than the person who asked the question. If I got something wrong, please tell me. I'd love to learn more. If it's something that's interpretive, tell me about the different interpretations. I'd love to know more. All right, into the actual video now. Here we go. Hello, welcome to answer time number 4, I believe. This time, we have a different kind of question. Here's the question. Could you explain some of the more interesting parts, in your opinion, of Elder Scrolls lore? Parentheses, you had mentioned there being a lot more to the planets / astronomy than perhaps I had known as an idea. Okay, so I'm going to take us through one thread that touches so much. And it is literally my favorite thread because it's just so interconnected to everything. Before we start that, we have to talk a little bit about Elder Scrolls lore. So, for those of you who don't know, the Elder Scrolls is a series of games that is the most famous series of games that Bethesda Software works on. Skyrim being the most popular, but you had a bunch of games. You have Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim as your main series. You have Elder Scrolls Online. You had a mobile game, or have the mobile game Elder Scrolls Blades. You had like Redguard was a adventure game, as was Battlespire. There were some phone games, other phone games. So there's a lot of stuff. And in these games, there's a very rich fantasy world. Lots of characters to talk to who know things, and a lot of books. A lot of just books everywhere to go and read. Something that's a little different in Elder Scrolls than in most games is that none of the books can be taken as truth, right? So in real life, you have to really work out what's true and what's not, right? Whenever you're reading sources. That's the same thing in here. When you're reading the ancient sources, ancient within the world, they have points of view, they have religions that they're trying to argue for, they have incomplete information. When you're reading the more modern sources that they're working with, that you can find in the world, same issue as we have here. They have arguments, they're picking their evidence, they aren't necessarily going to give you the absolute truth on some of the more complicated and tenuously grasped things. Now, additionally, there is unofficial lore, which is sometimes the writers who've worked on these say things in blogs, Q&As, whatever, and if it seems to fit perfectly, if it seems to fit, you can really use that to guide your thinking. But is it canon? Well, we don't know. We don't know. So that's really something you have to balance out across all of the things. Okay. So let's talk about my favorite piece of Elder Scrolls lore. I really hope you can't hear the pipes running right now because they're kind of noisy. Anyway, my favorite piece of Elder Scrolls lore. We're going to start very mundane, right? From in Morrowind and Skyrim, both the games and the provinces of Tamriel, you will find Dwemer Ruins, right? For those of you who don't know, Dwemer are a branch of the elf family and are kind of dwarvish, right? They were perhaps shorter. They lived underground, were very mechanically inclined, and if you go into their ruins, you'll still see their massive bronze machinery and brass machinery, or Dwemer metal, whatever that may be, machinery, working away and their automatons still functioning, and you have to fight them because, it's a video game. Okay, so the Dwemer, as far as I understand it, you should only find their ruins around Skyrim and Morrowind. Morrowind being where they came from, where they started. So, trying to decide how deep to go into this. Okay, the other thing is that you're not going to really meet any Dwemer. There's one exception, we're going to get to that. But, by and large, you're not going to meet any Dwemer. They're gone. They're all of them. Okay, so I find that really fun and cool, and trying to the big mystery of what happened to the Dwemer. There's a lot of theories, but we do have a very good notion as to when they disappeared, and they disappeared in an instant. So we have the Battle of Red Mountain. Now, Red Mountain is the volcano in the center of Morrowind. Morrowind being an island that, at that point, was also being contested by another group of elves called the Chimeri. Let's just make sure I have that right. Chimmer. And so now, and then there were some Nords and Orcs there also. Nords being humans, Orcs also being an offshoot of elves, but another story for another time. Okay, Battle of Red Mountain. It's a little unclear exactly what the battle was over. Okay, but number one, this was First Age, right? So we have the Mythic Age, Dawn Age, but this is the first era. So think of it as like the first solid timeline that we can work with, right? So prior to the first era, you had the Netheric era, or the Mythic era. So that's like the super duper ancient times. And then you had the Dawn era, where time and causality weren't exactly established, and that gets really, really weird. But first era, we have time. Time exists. So you have these two armies facing off, and in the middle of the battle, all the Dwemer disappear. This is the only agreed upon point. That's it. That's the only agreed upon point. Now, in the time of Morrowind, the game, some of the people who were at that battle still lived, right? Thousands and thousands of years later, because they became half god kind of things. But they still lived at that point. So, even though they witnessed it, they still couldn't give a complete understanding of what was happening. All right. So, why was there the Battle of Red Mountain? That seems like the first step. I already said that the Dwemer lived underground. And like all fantasy dwarves, they love to dig deep. And digging deep beneath Red Mountain, the Dwemer found something. This is according to the most probable account. For all of these things, unless I specifically give you multiple versions, I'm going to be giving you what I believe the community has determined to be most probable, or most correct, or most useful, something along those lines. All right, I might be wrong, because I am not there are people who know this lore way better than I do, but I'm giving my best attempt on that. That's the disclaimer. Okay, but so they dug deep. What did they find? They found an artifact known as the Heart of Lorkhan. Okay. Now, what was it? It was a literal heart. Okay. Literal metaphysical. It's hard to be precise on some of this. Lorkhan is one of the creation deities, right? In tradition, most religious traditions, he managed to either trick or convince the gods before creation to give up their physical forms with which the world could be created. Kind of. But that's enough for this. And then they found out his treachery. His heart got torn out, cast, and fell at Red Mountain. That's the story. Backing up that story is the Dwemer found a giant heart of incredible magic power in Red Mountain. So it seems like that would fit. Okay. Now, what did they do with this heart? Like I said, incredible magic power. What did they do? They build the Elder Scrolls most badass mech suit. Well, it wasn't a mech suit. It was just a mech, giant robot. The Numidium. These words are hard for me to pronounce well. The Numidium, giant wreck 'em up robot, which would pop up one other time at least in the history of Elder Scrolls, even though they didn't have the Heart of Locane to go with it. Now, the Heart of Locane is so powerful, the Dwemer had to make these special tools, and to even deal with it, these tools are a very important plot device point thing in the game Morrowind, and one of them even pops up, I believe, in Skyrim. Not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure. So, battle starts going, and the Dwemer are poof gone. Like, as far as anyone can tell, I mean, seems instantaneous. They vanish suddenly, right? And it's not just the ones at the battle. It was all of them. All of the Dwemer. Just gone. Except one who was traveling outside of the material planes at the time. And then he came back and discovered no one was there. Okay. So, yeah, that would suck. That would suck. And then he caught a disease that made him effectively immortal. So, whenever you meet him in Morrowind, he's very old, very bloated. Poor guy. Poor guy. But anyway, so now we have the Dwemer, the Cool. We know when they disappeared, but why did they disappear? And to understand that, we have to understand what the Heart of Lorcain is better. We have to understand that better. I gave you that brief overview of creation, but we got to roll it back. We got to roll it back. We got to get in more detail now. All right, so now we have to go back to the beginning in order to understand what the Heart of Lorcain. I'm going to keep changing how I pronounce things. To understand what that is, we have to go back to the beginning of this world. Okay, so there were depending on what brand of mythology you ascribe to, there were probably two beings, concepts, something along those lines that existed. Chaos and order, light and dark, that kind of dichotomy, depending on which in universe mythology, you're going to get different names, slightly different stories. But for our purposes, we will call them Anu and Sithis. Sithis, famous for the Dark Brotherhood, still worship Sithis. Hail Sithis. But in there you had, basically where they interacted, you had the creation of these divine spirits. The chief among them was Akatosh, but the they were the Et Ada, all right, the Et Ada, these initial spirits. The first of them was Akatosh, which you know you'll Akatosh plays the biggest role in Oblivion, um, with the promise, the amulet. You'll know what I'm talking about if you think that's a whole nother story. Okay, so you have these beings, and they exist in this divine, unreal world. Okay, eventually, Lorcan has a plan. Um, he basically outlines this idea that they would create the mortal realm, which is Mundus. And depending on the story, he either um, he may have tricked the people into making it, and then found himself torn apart, or he may have gotten some more level of agreement and cooperation. Um, but here was the important thing: 8 of the Et Ada completely gave themselves over to making this Mundus real, to really creating Mundus. And those are the 8 divines, the gods that most characters deal with. Um, they ended up, like, the remains of them ended up being the planets. Okay, like literally, what's left of them after they gave all of their magic kind of just plumped into the planets in the sky. So after those planets were forming, Magnus, who was one of the Et Ada, left. And so he left for that spiritual divine realm, which is Aetherius, like Aether, Aetherius. And yeah, he ripped out of there. That rip went into Aetherius through Oblivion. We're gonna conceptualize this better in a minute. That became the sun. That hole is magic pouring through Aetherius, from Aetherius through Oblivion into Mundus. Okay, that's the sun. A bunch of other of these Et Ada were like, we're not dealing with this. We're not getting stuck here, made into this mortal world. So they all also left, and they poked smaller holes through Oblivion to get to Aetherius, and those holes became the stars. Once again, leaking the magic into this world. Some Et Ada were like, well, we made Mundus, we'll chill here. And those became elves and first men, and that's that. Okay, so the because of Lorcan's role in all of this, some level of trickery, okay, happened. He got his heart ripped out of him and shot off, thing. But then the rest of his body, his corpse got split into 2, chucked up in the sky, and those are the moons. So that's okay. So Lorcan is inherently connected with Mundus, with the physical realm at all. Okay. He created Mundus with help. He came from Aetherius, and he was one of those spirits created just from nothing, from the collision of light and dark, chaos and order. Okay. Okay, so now we have a notion of the cosmos as you would see it from the ground in an Elder Scrolls game. But we haven't talked about the Oblivion realms, which get visited from time to time, and which obviously the Dremora come from. Pardon me. And we haven't tied it back to the Dwemer. We'll get to the second one in a bit. The first one we're going to address right now. Okay, so we play on Mundus. We occasionally get to touch Oblivion. We never get to touch the planets. But here's the thing. The totality of the universe is known as Erebus. Arbus. Arbus. It's the totality of everything is Arbus. And that's the total space made by the collision of Anu and Sithis, or Padme, depending on how you want to name it. Okay, now those are arranged in a way with Mundus at the middle. Okay, Mundus is the center. It's known as the hub. The 8 planets made from the remains of the 8 divines are known as the spokes. And then around the outside is Aetherius. In between those spokes is Oblivion. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Beyond Aetherius is the void of just nothingness. So we have, and altogether this is known as the wheel. Now, that means that, we assume that the planets are spherical, like we would expect. Even if Nirn was flat, we still see these spheres in the sky. They hardly look like spokes of a wheel. But apparently, at some higher level or lower level of dimensional tomfoolery, that's what's going on. We have the wheel, we have the spokes. So now we know where Oblivion fits into this stuff. The realms of Oblivion. And they're apparently separated out chunk-wise between these spokes of the wheel. Then we have to look a little more metaphysical. We went from very definite, like, astronomy to some very mythological astronomy to some weird higher dimensional nonsense. Now we're going to go metaphysical. Okay, you might think that the wheel is like, maybe some kind of weird 3-dimensional thing. However, or, like some kind of ball, maybe, weird. Yeah, I don't know. You get what I'm saying. It's hard to conceptualize. But it's very specifically, definitely to be thought of in a single, as a narrow object. An object with definite narrowness. Because then we get to what is one of the secrets of Elder Scrolls lore. Okay. I'm going to take a step back for a minute. Towers are very important in these games. There's the white gold tower at the center of Cyrodiil, at the heart of the capital. We have, the adamantine tower from Battle Mage. There's Crystal Lake Law, which shows up in Somerset Isles, and just goes. And there's more metaphysical towers, like the Red Tower, which is the Red Mountain. Okay. So, towers have been important. There's also in their astronomy or astrology, the tower is a birth sign that has specific effects. The tower is very tied in loosely, weirdly, just hints and um, just suggestions throughout everything. Here's the most important tower. If you view the the wheel from the side, you see the tower. What does that mean? Heck if I know. There's just known as that if you view it. Okay. We're going to get the exact quote. That's necessary here. Okay. So, this is a book that was first seen in Elder Scrolls Online. It is canon, and it builds on things from all over. Okay, so this is on the detachment of the sheath from the integument by Archprelate Fervidus Tharn. He was a very important and powerful dude, right? Okay. An explanation on an aspect of Arubis. All right. Here's the exact quote. Though all given concavites or sheaths within the integument of Arubis are necessarily contained by the Arubis, right reaching dictates that a defined sheath may be detached from the integument by an invocation of Menomoli. Upon intercourse with the star orphan, those are the Et Ada who left stars when they shot through. Upon intercourse with the star orphan, the beseeching Alcetic performs. He was a member of the Alcetic order. Performs eversion of the organ of thought, in employment of the hurling disc that recapitulates the truth that a circle turned sideways is a tower, by the same truth enveloping a sheath into the middle dawn, to the number of 17, brings it to untime and unplace. Eventualism, of course, predicts reabsorption upon depletion of the wheeling force, but absent the duration may render even eventuality moot. There's a lot there. Two things that we need to focus on. That you view the circle on its side, the wheel on its side, you see that becomes the tower. And by seeing that same truth, you get to reach back to middle dawn. That's the before times before time, right? Where you brings it to untime and unplace, and during the absence of the duration may render even eventuality moot, right? Get to totally F with time, space, the laws of reality, just all of that. Okay? Now, that sounds interesting, right? That sounds like something some crazy dwarves might be into. And you'd be right. Okay. CHIM. CHIM. All capitals. That's what we're talking about. Being able to see the tower and survive is CHIM. Here's where we're starting to get off into some unofficial sources that I think in general deep lore people view as true. I'm not a deep lore expert, but I think that's what they view. I think it's generally viewed as true in some level. So we're getting a little off here, but there's still real evidence in the games for CHIM. specifically in the writings of Vivek, I think is where we get most of it. Vivek was a tribunal god who we think achieved CHIM and was at the Battle of Red Mountain that we started way back at the beginning of this conversation. Okay, so we're rapidly approaching the limit of my understanding, but we have a little bit farther to go. So, if we go off the official lore and we're going into unofficial territory, CHIM is one of the the 6 steps of the ways of walking, the walking ways. It's the 5th step. Excuse me. And if we go away from this, we find that those who achieve CHIM, those who would try to achieve CHIM, come to a central issue, a central juncture. To achieve CHIM, as we stated, would be to completely change the world, to be able to modify it as you see fit. In doing this, they start to see the next step, which is Godhead, which is the 6th step. In theory, I know we started off with Anu and Sithis, but in theory, those two were both dreamed up by Godhead. To be Godhead is to be the source of all in the world, but unable to directly affect it. Essentially, everything in the world is part of Godhead. And without Godhead, nothing exists. Like if it's an impossible, thing. Godhead is the world. The world exists in the mind of Godhead. But Godhead can't do anything in the world, nor can the world do anything to Godhead, basically. When you achieve CHIM, you realize that you don't exist. Most people, upon realizing this, basically cease existing. And it's not just a matter of understanding I don't exist and I cease existing. It's unclear exactly how this works. But the general notion is that you exist and you don't exist equally. And you come into this knowledge that you don't exist equally to the knowledge that you do exist. And in the mind of Godhead, those sum out to 0. It's some people talk about, achieving CHIM, failing to achieve CHIM, you end up 0 summing. If you do achieve CHIM, that means that for some reason, something in you was ready to handle existing and not existing, equaling out to something not 0. So you didn't 0 sum. Now, that is very unclear exactly what that is, but it appears to be some kind of drive, something in your personality, something in the reason you're trying to achieve CHIM. There are very few characters in the lore who are even thought to have maybe achieved CHIM. Vivek we're pretty sure on. Talos is assumed. Here's the thing. So Vivek becomes super powerful. You actually get to meet him and talk to him. And he doesn't really, try to stop anything. The bad guys, just that's in Morrowind, the game that he's in. Assumably he has CHIM. He should be able to just unmake the bad guy. But he doesn't. Similarly, Talos, he has CHIM. He became emperor, founded the first empire, maybe messed with time and space in a few places, but he shouldn't have had to work hard for it. He has CHIM. There's an assumption in that CHIM makes you lose all will to change things to your will. So then that the way you use CHIM ends up being exclusively to the benefit of others. I should mention the sixth step. If you make it to the sixth step of the walking ways, you become Godhead, which ejects you from this universe entirely, and you become the Godhead of your own universe. So, we get into an interesting problem, because there's actually two interpretations of these walking ways. Now, the one interpretation is the in-universe metaphysical one that I've described to you. The second is a real-life universe interpretation, in that then CHIM is the ability to modify the game. You could just modify it such that you have infinite money and whatnot, but you get bored of that quick, and so then you end up modifying it just to make the world more interesting and more challenging and more full, whatever. Then Godhead is you leaving playing the Elder Scrolls for however long and making your own universe, making your own game. So the Enderall mod folks would have achieved Godhead. But equally, a lot of people think that the first description I gave, the in-universe description, is true. I like to think they're both true. I think they can both be true, and with lore as confusing as we've been dealing with, it makes equal amounts of sense. Why can't both and neither be true at the same time and no time? Because mythic time. You get what I mean. It all gets very confusing. Okay, how does this tie back to the Dwemer? The Dwemer were anti-theists, basically. They ignored the Adria and the Daedra as much as they could. They were driven to CHIM, driven to achieve CHIM, if they were, because they wanted to make things better for themselves. Doesn't sound like the kind of people who would manage to actually achieve CHIM and solve the problem of zero-summing themselves. And so that's the theory out there right now, is that they failed CHIM as a race. They tried to do something to messing with the heart of Lorcain, who Lorcain may have been the first to achieve CHIM. There's a theory about that. That's how he came up with the ability to make Mundus. It was because he left the wheel when it was just a bunch of oblivion and then a ring of Ethereum around Aetherius. Anyway, the Aether around it, left the wheel, or the primordial wheel, whatever it was, saw the tower, achieved CHIM, and then made the world. So maybe he has that connection to CHIM. Maybe that's how the heart connects to the Dwemer, connects to the making of CHIM, which then makes them disappear. Maybe. We don't know, and we can never know. But it's a lot of fun to think about and piece apart and twist around. Because, and the Dwemer, I love, because in order to understand them, we have to go to their physical locations, understand what's happening there. We have to understand the weird magic of this universe as it affects the people in the day-to-day with the artifacts around. And we have to understand this multi-layered cosmology that just is bonkers. It's just bonkers. If you want to learn more, I recommend three things. First thing, read books in the universe. When you find a book, pick it up, read it, and if you don't understand what's going on, go and Google it and someone will explain it to you. Number 2, go to the Unofficial Elder Scrolls Wiki. That's uesp.net. I'll put a link in the description. They answer all the questions, or they have all the material, basically, and it's collated, and there's good references, and the references in there are, they delineate between unofficial and official, and the officials are all like books in the universe, and they just have them transcribed for you, so you can step your way through. And then finally, there's the unofficial source, which was that one writer that left many years ago, but everything still seems to fit. And the reason for that is Elder Scrolls, there's a job. It's an official lore master. It's a dude with a big white beard. He looks like a wizard. And his job is to make sure the lore all works together. So, it sounds like a cool job. Don't know how you get that job, but it sounds sweet. Anyway, I'm going to put both of those below to hopefully, go out, read more. Talos, super interesting. The Mythic Age, the Dawn Age. What happens is Dwemer, the Falmer. Where did humans come from? The initial thing between the humans and the elves, and the tower, and where are the Red Guard from? All of these things are magnificent mysteries that you can just dive into, and just keeps going. The Argonians and the Khajiit. What's up with them? What's up with the other whole continent? There was a period of time where snake men from the other continent invaded this continent and took over as puppet viziers, or viziers making puppet emperors out of the empire. Did you know that? Did you know that they founded the blades that are so central to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th games in different levels of centrality? They were founded by snake men from another continent. And if I remember right, vampiric snake men. It's all really worth looking at. But you're going to have to take little bits of it, stick it together, and find the fun. Alright, so that's that for this video. No idea how long that ended up being. A lot of it, I think I gave vastly oversimplified versions of what I've read. But hopefully that whets the appetite. I will post another Hitman video on the weekend and have more stuff to do, more video ideas, and send more questions. I'm out of questions. Your question will be next in the line. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.